Welcome back to the BFG. Last part we learned that the BFG drinks Frobscottle, and Frobscottle is an interesting drink. Instead of the bubbles coming up, the Frobscottle bubbles go down, which creates a whiz popper. And Sophie in the BFG drank some Frobscottle, and in doing so, they both whiz popped. So, if you don't remember, you have to go back and listen to what a whiz pop is. And today, we're going to find out about the Dream Country. So, this chapter is called Journey to Dream Country. After the mad Frobscottle party was over, Sophie settled herself again on top of the enormous table. "You is feeling much better now?" asked the big friendly giant. "Much better, thank you," Sophie said. "Whenever I was feeling a bit scrotty," he said, "a few gollops of Frobscottle was always making me hopscotchy again." "I must say it's quite an experience," Sophie said. "It's a raz-twizzler," he said. "It's glorumtious." He turned away and strode across the cave and picked up his dream-catching net. "I is galloping off now," he said, "to catch some whopsy-whiffling dreams for my collection. I is doing this every day without missing. Is you wishing to come with me?" "Not me, thank you very much," Sophie told him. "Not with those other giants lurking outside." "I is snuggling you very cozy into my pocket of my waistcoat," said the BFG. "Then no one is seeing you." Before Sophie could protest, he had picked her up off the table and popped her into his waistcoat pocket. There was plenty of room in there. "Is you wishing for a little hole to peep out from?" he asked. "There's one here already," she said. She had found a small hole in the pocket, and when she put one eye close to it, she could see out very well indeed. She watched the BFG as he bent down and filled the suitcase with empty glass jars. He closed the lid, picked up the suitcase in one hand, took the pole with the net on the end in the other, and marched towards the entrance of the cave. As soon as he was outside, the BFG set off across the great hot yellow wasteland where the blue rocks lay and the dead tree stood and where all the other giants were skulking about. Sophie, squatting low on her heels in the pocket of the leather waistcoat, had one eye glued to the little hole. She saw the group of enormous giants about 300 yards ahead. "Hold your breaths," the BFG whispered down to her. "Cross your figglers, here we go. We is going right past all those other giants. Is you seeing that whopping great one, the one nearest to us?" I see him," Sophie whispered back, quivering. "That is the horriblest of them all, and the biggest of them all. He is called the flesh-lump-eating giant." "I don't want to hear about him," Sophie said. "He is 54 feet high," the BFG said softly as he jogged along, "and he is swallowing human beings like they is sugar lumps, 2 or 3 at a time." "You're making me nervous," Sophie said. "I's nervous myself," the BFG whispered. "I always gets as jumpsy as a jog humper when the flesh-lump-eating giant is around." "Keep away from him," Sophie pleaded. "Not possible," he answered. "He is galloping easily 2 times as quicksy as me." "Shall we turn back?" Sophie said. "Turning back is worse. If they is seeing me running away, they is all giving chase and throwing rocks." "They would never eat you, though, would they?" Sophie asked. "Giants is never guzzling other giants," the BFG said. "They is fighting and squirreling a lot with each other, but never guzzling. Human beings is more tasty to them." The giants had already spotted the BFG, and all heads were turned, watching him as he jogged forward. He was aiming to pass well to the right of the group. Through a little peephole, Sophie saw the flesh-lump-eating giant moving over to intercept them. He didn't hurry. He just loped over casually to a point where the BFG would have to pass. The others loped after him. Sophie counted 9 of them all together, and she recognized the blood bottler in the middle of them. They were bored. They had nothing to do until nightfall. There was an air of menace about them as they loped slowly across the plain with long, lolloping strides, heading for the BFG. "Here comes the runty one," boomed the flesh-lump-eater. "Ho-hee, there, runty one. Where is you splatch-winkling away to in such a hefty hurry?" He shot an enormous arm and grabbed the BFG by the hair. The BFG didn't struggle. He simply stopped and stood quite still and said, "Be so kind as to be letting go of my hair, Flesh Lump Eater." The Flesh Lump Eater released him and stepped back a pace. The other giants stood around waiting for the fun to start. "Now then, you little grob squiffler," boomed the Flesh Lump Eater. "We is all wanting to know where's you galloping off to every day in the daytime. Nobody ought to be galloping off to anywhere until it's getting dark. The human beings could easily be spotting you and starting a giant hunt, and we is not wanting that to happen, is we not?" "We is not," shouted the other giants. "Go back to your cave, runty one." I is not galloping to any human being country," the BFG said. "I is going to other places." "I is thinking," said the Flesh Lump Eater, "that you is catching human beings and keeping them as pets." "Right you is," cried the blood bottler. "Just now I is hearing him chittering away to one of them in his cave." "You is welcome to go and search my cave from frack to bunt," BFG answered. "You can go looking into every crook and nanny. There's no human beans, or stringy beans, or runner beans, or jelly beans, or any other beans in there." Sophie crouched still as a mouse inside the BFG's pocket. She hardly dared to breathe. She was terrified she might sneeze. The slightest sound or movement would give her away. Through the tiny peephole, she watched the giants clustering around the poor BFG. How revolting they were. All of them had piggy little eyes and enormous mouths. When the Flesh Lump Eater was speaking, she got a glimpse of his tongue. It was jet black, like a slab of black steak. Every one of them was more than twice as tall as the BFG. Suddenly, the Flesh Lump Eater shot out two enormous hands and grabbed the BFG around the waist. He tossed him high in the air and shouted, "Catch him, man-hugger!" The man-hugger caught him. The other giants spread out quickly in a large circle, each giant about 20 yards from his neighbor, preparing for the game they were going to play. Now the man-hugger threw the BFG high and far, shouting, "Catch him, Bone Cruncher!" The Bone Cruncher ran forward and caught the tumbling BFG and immediately swung him up again. "Catch him, Child Chewer!" he shouted, and so it went on. The giants were playing ball with the BFG, vying with each other to see who could throw him the highest. Sophie dug her nails into the sides of his pocket, trying to prevent herself from tumbling out when she was upside down. She felt as though they were in a barrel going over Niagara Falls, and all the time there was the fearful danger that one of the giants would fail to catch the BFG, and he would go crashing to the ground. "Catch him, Meat Dripper! Catch him, Gizzard Gulper! Catch him, Maid Masher! Catch him, Blood Bottler! Catch him! Catch him! Catch him!" In the end, they got bored with this game. They dumped the poor BFG on the ground. He was dazed and shattered. They gave him a few kicks and shouted, "Run, little runt! Let us be seeing how fast you is galloping." The BFG ran. What else could he do? The giants picked up rocks and hurled them after him. He managed to dodge them. "Ruddy little runt!" they shouted. "Troggy little twit! Shrivelly little shrimp! Mucky little midget! Squaggy little squib! Grubby little grub!" And here we have a picture of the giants playing their game with the BFG. At last, here, another picture I'll show you. BFG high up in the air with the other giants prepared to catch. At last, the BFG got clear of all, and in another couple of minutes, the pack of giants was out of sight over the horizon. Sophie popped her head up from the pocket. "I didn't like that," she said. "Phew," said the BFG. "Phew and far between. They was in a nasty crouching mood today, was they not? I is sorry you was having such a whirligig time." "No worse than you," Sophie told him. "Would they ever really hurt you?" "I isn't ever trusting them," he said. "How do they actually catch humans they eat?" Sophie asked. They is usually just sticking an arm in through the bedroom window and snitching them from their beds," the BFG said. "Like you did to me?" "Ah, but I isn't eating you," the BFG said. "How else do they catch them?" Sophie asked. "Sometimes," he said, "they is swimming in from the sea like fishies with only their heads showing above the water, and then out comes a big hairy hand and grabbles someone off the beach." "Children as well?" Often chidlers, the BFG said. Little chidlers who is building sandcastles on the beach. That is who the swimmeling ones are after. Little chidlers is not so tough to eat as the old grandmama, so says the child-chewing giant. As they talked, the BFG was galloping fast over the land. Sophie was standing right up in the waistcoat pocket now and was holding onto the edge with both hands. Her head and shoulders were open and the wind was blowing in her hair. How else do they catch people? She asked. All of them is having their own special ways of catching the human being, the BFG said. The meat-dripping giant is preferring to pretend he is a big tree growing in the park. He is standing in the park in the dusky evening, and he is holding great big branches over his head. And there he is waiting until some happy families is coming to have a picnic under the spreading tree. The meat-dripping giant is watching them as they lay out their little picnic, but in the end, it is the meat-dripper who is having the picnic. It's too awful, Sophie cried. The gizzard-gulping giant is a city lover, the BFG went on. The gizzard-gulper is lying high up between the roofs of houses in the big cities. He is lying there snuggy as a sniggler and watching the human beings walking on the street below. And when he sees one that looks like a whopsy good flavor, he grabs it. He is simply reaching down and snitching it off the street like a monkey taking a nut. He says it's nice to be able to pick and choose what you is having for your supper. He says it's like choosing from a menu. Don't people see him doing it? Sophie asked. Never they is seeing him. Do not forget it is dusky dark at this time. Also, the gizzard gulper has a very fast arm. His arm is going up and down quicker than Squinker's. But if all these people are disappearing every night, surely there's some sort of an outcry, Sophie said. The world is a whopping big place. It has 100 different countries. The giant is clever. They is careful not to be skiddling off to the same country too often. They has always switched fiddling around. Even so, Sophie said, do not forget, the BFG told her, that human beings is disappearing everywhere all the time without the giants is guzzling them up. Human beings is killing each other much quicker than the giants is doing it. But they don't eat each other, she told him. Giants isn't eating each other either, nor is giants killing each other. Giants is not very lovely, but they is not killing each other, nor is crocodile-dillies killing other crocodile-dillies, nor is pussycats killing other pussycats. Well, they kill mice, Sophie said. Ah, but that is not killing their own kind. Human beings is the only animal that is killing their own kind. Don't poisonous snakes kill each other? Sophie asked. She was searching desperately for another creature that behaved as badly as the human. Even the poison-owl snakes is never killing each other. Nor is the most fearsome creatures like tigers and rhinoceroses. None of them is ever killing their own kind. Has you ever thought about that? Sophie kept silent. I is not understanding human beings at all, the BFG said. You is a human being, and you is saying it is grizzling and horricus for giants to be eating human beings, right or left. Well, right, Sophie said. But human beings is squishing each other all the time. They is shooting guns and going up in airplanes to drop their bombs on each other's heads every week. Human beings is always killing other human beings. He was right, of course. He was right, and Sophie knew it. She was beginning to wonder whether human beings were actually any better than the giants. Even so, she said, defending her own race, I think it's rotten that some of these foul giants should go off every night to eat humans. Humans have never done any harm to them. That is what the little piggly-wig is saying every day, he answered. He is saying, I've never done any harm to the human being, so why should he be eating me? Oh, dear, Sophie said. The human beings is making rules to suit themselves, BFG went on. But the rules they is making do not suit the little piggly wigglies. Am I right or left? Well, you're right, Sophie said. Giants is also making their rules. Their rules is not suiting human beings. Everybody is making his own rules to suit himself. But you don't like it that those beastly giants are eating humans every night, do you? She asked. I do not, the BFG answered firmly. One right is not making two lefts. If you quite cozy down there, is you quite cozy down there in my pocket? I'm fine, Sophie said. Then suddenly, once again, the BFG went into that magical top gear of his. He began hurtling forward with the phenomenal leaps. His speed was unbelievable. The landscape became blurred, and again Sophie had to duck down out of the whistling gale to save her head from being blown off her shoulders. She crouched in the pocket and listened to the wind screaming past. It came knifing in through the tiny peephole in the pocket and whooshed around her like a hurricane. But this time, the BFG didn't stay in top gear long. It seemed as though he had some barrier to cross, a vast mountain, perhaps an ocean or a great desert, but having crossed it, he once again slowed down to his normal gallop, and Sophie was able to pop her head up and look out once more at the view. She noticed immediately that they were now in an altogether paler country. The sun had disappeared above a film of vapor. The air was becoming cooler every minute. The land was flat and treeless, and there seemed to be no color in it at all. Every minute the mist became thicker, the air became colder still, and everything became paler and paler until soon there was nothing but gray and white all around them. They were in a country of swirling mists and ghostly vapors. There was some sort of grass underfoot, but it was not green, it was ashy gray, and there was no sign of a living creature, and no sound at all except for the soft thud of the BFG's footsteps as he hurtled on through the fog. Suddenly, he stopped. "We is here at last," he announced. He bent down and lifted Sophie from his pocket and put her on the ground. She was still in her nightie and her feet were bare. She shivered and stared around at the swirling mists and ghostly vapors. "Where are we?" she asked. "We is in dream country," the BFG said. "This is where all the dreams is beginning." And we'll stop there for this part. Join me for the next part, and we will find out about how the BFG catches dreams. They're now in dream country. So we'll see you next time.